Hey, Pittsburgh, hide your mom's friends, and hide your grandmas too, because Zach Wilson's coming to town. Yes, yesterday it was confirmed that Z-Dub is cleared from his injury and will be starting for the Jets this Sunday against the Steelers. The incumbent Joe Flacco put up a valiant effort as the Jets starting quarterback for the first 3 games of the season, and even though he is almost leading the league somehow in passing yards, he's still Joe Flacco, and the Jets want to see what the future holds in their former number 2 overall pick from 2021. And despite Wilson having a 110% approval rating from fans across the NFL, the question still remains, are we sure he's good at the game of football? We know he's good at the game of life. He's winning at that. I know he's a leader. People look up to him, but can he win games? Like, seriously, I actually think if Joe Flacco would have remained the starting quarterback for this particular game, the Jets may have had a better chance. Not only am I not sure if Zach Wilson's good at football, but what I do know is he's going to be rusty coming off of this injury and being the first game that he's starting in 2022, which in my opinion will benefit the Steelers, which is also the perfect segue into our Steelers-Jets preview, and we will let the gambling apps and the betting be our guide, so let's get into it. But first, let's take a look at how we did last week for the Steelers-Browns game. Spoiler alert, not good. Our first same-game parlay included Najee Harris over 52.5 rushing yards. Check, that one hit. Pickens over 29.5 receiving yards. Check, that one hit. But then I also had Najee Harris over 17.5 receiving yards. That was no good. He only had 5. I also did Steelers money line. That was a no. And then my can't miss parlay. I told you it can't miss. Mitch had over 150 passing yards. Check. Najee Harris, 40-plus rushing yards. Check. Deontay Johnson, over 44.5 receiving yards. Check. Muth, over 25 receiving yards. Check. Pickens, over 15 receiving yards. Najee Harris, an anytime touchdown. But we missed the most important part. You play to win the game. I also had Steelers money line, and the can't miss parlay unfortunately missed. And then also that last little bet that I put together where it was that parlay, Steelers plus 10, total under for the game, 44.5. Whenever you parlay the two, you get minus 110. That was going to hit. I know I didn't put money on it, but I was just throwing it out there as a suggestion where I thought it was a lock, and it pretty much was. Because the Steelers, at the time, whenever there was 5 or 6 seconds left, were only down 6, so that plus 10 hits. And the under was, I think it was 23 plus 17, right? 40. That was 40 total points. So the under of 44.5 was going to hit as well. But then the fluky fumble happened, and yeah, the parlay didn't hit. So we were 0 for across the board last week. 0 for 4. Bad week, but this is why they call it the bounce back. So for this Steelers-Jets game, let's start with the quarterbacks. Mitch, his over-under for passing yards is 215.5. I am staying away from this one. I think Mitch will play fine this week. I think he's actually going to keep improving. But he is just around that 200 range of 200 yards, 180, 190. I don't really want to mess with this one because I don't think Mitch has to throw for over 200 for us to win this game or for him to even play well. So yeah, I'm staying off that one, especially with the odds just being even. If they were boosted a little bit, maybe. But the ones I do like for Mitch is the over-under for the touchdowns at 1.5 touchdowns. Plus 135 on the odds. I will take the risk on that because I do think the Steelers get 2 touchdowns at least, potentially 3. It's all just going to depend on how it's divvied up. Does Najee get a rushing? Does Mitch get 2 throwing? Does Najee get 2 on the ground? I don't know, but I'll take the risk at those odds because, as I said, I do think Mitch is going to play pretty well in this one. The other one I like for Mitch is the interception over-under. They have the line set at 0.5, which is basically if you take the under, you don't think Mitch is going to throw a pick. If you take the over, you do think Mitch is going to toss one to the other team. The under, which is what I like, I don't think he's going to throw a pick. The odds are set at plus 105. He's been taking care of the ball outside of the Patriots game. He hasn't thrown a pick yet. I know the Jets secondary is kind of decent with Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, but Mitch really doesn't throw interceptable passes. I mean, think of these first 3 games. There's been like 2 or 3 maybe. Browns game, he kept it clean, and I expect him to do the same in this one against the Jets. Now let's go to the Jets quarterback, Zach Wilson. The bet that I like for him is under 0.5 touchdowns. I don't think he's going to throw one against this Steelers defense. Yesterday, the line for this, and this is another reason I like it because the odds are pretty good, the line was at plus 200. But this morning I checked, and it's already moved to plus 175. So the Sharks are already all over this one. Also, Big Deke Investments. So what does that tell you? This is probably going to be a sure thing. But why I like this one is because at the beginning, I already talked about Zach Wilson being rusty coming off of this injury. And also just the fact that if you look back to last year, in the 13 games that Zach Wilson appeared in 7 of them, he put a goose egg up in terms of a passing touchdown. So that's more than half. The percentage is there in your favor, and also he's coming off this injury. Combine that with Tomlin usually does well against young and inexperienced quarterbacks. And even though the Steelers haven't played Zach Wilson just yet, you know who did? Brian Flores last year with Miami. And whenever Miami played the Jets, you guessed it, Zach Wilson put up 0 passing touchdowns. But wait, that's not all. Because in combination with Zach Wilson not throwing a touchdown, I think he's going to throw a pick. The problem with this one, though, is the odds aren't set too good. They're at minus 230. That's because these betting apps think he's actually going to do it. So I'm going to look to maybe throw that into some type of parlay down the line. And outside of quarterback, I'm liking George Pickens. This has been like pretty much a staple thus far this season. His over on the receiving yards, the line's at 31.5, and the odds are at minus 110. It hit last week. It did work, barely, not by much, but it seems like that line's sticking around 29, 30, 31 yards, understandably, because that's pretty much what his average is thus far this season. It may even be less than that. But whenever you consider, again, another week goes by in between games where all the talk is about getting Pickens the ball more, Mitch has acknowledged it. It surely will happen this week, right? So I don't want to miss out on that. We'll do the over again on the receiving yards with Pickens. And his targets have been trending upwards slowly but surely. I also think Muth has a good game. One of the Jets starting linebackers is most likely going to be out in Quincy Williams. And his over-under for receiving yards is at 36.5. He's hit that over 2 out of 3 times thus far this year, the first game and also in the last game. And then whenever you look at the Jets' defense, they are averaging, letting up 48.3 yards per game against tight ends for the season. So I'm liking this matchup. I do think Muth gets the over on that 36.5 receiving yards. And lastly, for the player props, this one doesn't even exist. I just want to throw it out there that I wish it did. Now, DraftKings does do defensive props. They're just not up yet, but when they do, it's just tackles. I wish they had like a sack over under because I think Alex Highsmith is going to feast in this game. He's basically going up against the Jets' 3rd or 4th string left tackle after Mekhi Becton went down with injury, then Dwayne Brown, and then finally just this last game, George Fant is on the IR. So I expect Alex Highsmith to at least, he's got to get at least a sack, but he's going to have a ton of impact this game, just like he did in the Browns game and also in the Bengals game as well. And now for the traditional lines. They got the spread set at -3 or -3.5 for the Steelers, depending on what betting app you use. And I'm good with that because obviously you're going to get better odds with that spread as opposed to just taking money line. And I think the Steelers should win this game by a touchdown. My keys for the Steelers winning this game is pretty fucking simple. It's the same exact thing that we talked about these last 2 games. And that's stop the run because the Jets actually have a decent running attack when they utilize it with Breece Hall and also Michael Carter. The problem is they've had to start abandoning it in these first 3 weeks because they get down early and then they got to pass the ball. So, hey, newsflash, why don't we just do the same thing? Stop the run, make Zach Wilson try to beat us and make the Jets one-dimensional. But at the same time, to do that, we need to have the offense cooking early like we did in the Browns game. Stop the run, make the Jets one-dimensional, get some early points on the board with this Steelers offense. Sounds pretty simple to me. Now, I also like the style of bet that I suggested last week if you want to take the more conservative approach, where you move the line for the Steelers spread and also the over-under and parlay them together, and it gives you around even odds. So for this one, it's Steelers +4, and the over-under is at 47.5. That gets you plus 102 odds, so pretty much even. And don't forget, the last week's one would have hit. I think I had the Steelers +10. I already talked about it, +10, and the line was, or the over-under was at like 44. Would have hit outside of those last 5 seconds with the fluke fumble. So even though we missed last week, I still think the theory is sound. And you can find this one on Barstool. This one is not on DraftKings. Sometimes it's tough to move the lines and get them parlayed with different apps, but Barstool will let you. So that's where you could find something like this. And finally, of course, we need our can't miss parlay. The can't miss parlay is whenever you just put a bunch of props together and take a look at it and say, this can't miss. First, we got Trubisky with over 170 passing yards. Steelers with 16.5 total points on the over. Deontay Johnson, 50-plus receiving yards. Muth, 20-plus receiving yards. Steelers money line. Pickens, 20-plus receiving yards. And if I can add the Zach Wilson interception eventually, if that prop becomes available for same-game parlays, I'll probably toss that in there. And maybe something else. But right now, this is the framework of what I will be working with. So far, it looks like it can't miss. Usually, I put like $5 on it. It'll get you between like $60 to $100 in profit, depending on what the odds are. But yeah, can't miss. I don't expect it to either. That is it for this edition of Big Deke News and the Steelers-Jets preview. Let me know what you guys think of the game coming up. If you have any bold predictions, let me know down in the comments. But stay chilling. Peace.